Hello and welcome to the Awaken Feminine podcast. I'm your host, Kaki Lee, a mindset coach and healer who's on a mission to share the love and wisdom of inspiring women who have gone through adversity and turned their pain into purpose. Today, I am delighted to be interviewing Sophie Beynon, an international health coach, personal trainer, nutrition coach, and weight loss specialist, helping women achieve the body that they've always wanted. I recently met Sophie via one of my online courses and really loved her energy and what she's offering. And we're now in an amazing women coaches mastermind together. She's a busy mum of four who is passionate about helping busy women feel and look amazing, and an eternal optimist as well. I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us today. Do I have you there, Sophie?
Yes, you do. Hi.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on the Awaken Feminine podcast. So firstly, can
Very
you share
welcome.
with everyone where you're joining me from?
Yeah, sure. I'm calling from Edinburgh today in Scotland. So a little
Lovely.
bit away, quite far away from where you are today.
Yes. Yeah, very far on the other side of the earth. I'm in Perth, for those who don't know. And yeah, I think I was talking to you briefly before. I went to Edinburgh 13 years ago, so a long time ago, but I really loved it. The castle is just beautiful and it's just such a lovely place. So yeah, I'd love
Yeah,
to go back
it's
there one
just
day.
lovely.
Yeah. So, Sophie, let's dive in. So, I know you are passionate about helping women feel and look amazing. Can you kind of first share with us what you were doing before becoming a health and nutrition coach, and also your journey on how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure, of course. It goes way, way back for me, really. I've always been into sort of into health in general. As a family, we were quite healthy as well. Um, but I grew up in the 70s, when TV dinners were were invented, and
Yeah.
convenience foods, and my parents were working and stuff. So I kind of grew up in that kind of era. But I hit a real kind of hiccup when I was in my teens, and I'm a self-confessed perfectionist. I will put my hands up and say, like a lot of people, like a lot of coaches,
Yeah.
I'm a real perfectionist, and I set myself a lot of high standards, and particularly going through my teens, that was just I kind of I was as one of those people who it really didn't matter how well I did, it just kind of wasn't quite good enough.
Yeah.
And I just it all came from the best of intentions,
Mm.
I wanted to do well, and I wanted to make my family proud, and and kind of in amongst all that, that was kind of the era of when kind of low fat, low sugar diets kind of hit the media.
Oh, yeah.
Everything was, you know what it's like. It was just everything in the girls' magazines, in the media. Everything was just diet this and diet that,
Yeah.
um, and I'd started already trying to get fit, just generally kind of sort of quite healthily so originally, and I think that kind of that need to always better myself and to do well kind of just and I was really struggling with stress kind of that I was more than anything that I was placing on myself through
Yeah.
exams, and it just kind of mounted up, and before I even knew what was happening, I just took it that one step too far, and we
Yeah.
see it even as coaches. I see it now where you start off with really good intentions, wanting to kind of to be fit and healthy, but kind of the results that you're getting are just never quite somehow good enough.
Yeah.
um, and I just sort of I went from losing a little bit of weight and getting a bit fatter to kind of losing a lot of weight, and
Yeah.
before I knew it, I just the slight restrictions I placed on myself just became more restrictive and more restrictive,
Yeah.
um and I was kind of quite a quiet teenager. I didn't really kind of just wasn't I really didn't share a lot, but kind of my parents' lives were busy, and I was just busy kind of beavering away, and they saw me being studious and
Yeah.
doing all the things that were great for me to do. But I think I kind of hid it quite well for a long time,
Yeah.
and it just snowballed, and kind of one thing caught up with me, and and before I knew it, I'd lost a lot of weight. And I think by that point, when my parents realized there was a problem, I'd kind of lost the ability to really control it myself,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of bring myself back into to where I should be,
Yeah.
and lost perspective on it really. So sadly, by the time I was about 17, I ended up being hospitalized because my weight became so low
Yeah.
that I just became really, really unwell. Um, and and it's funny how these things kind of, it builds up very slowly, it kind of
Yeah.
it really, all small changes without me really even noticing.
Yeah.
But it did mount up, and yeah, I was really quite unwell. They were concerned that my heart would give out, and so concerned that I wasn't allowed to sort of to get out of bed for a long time,
Yeah.
and exert myself in any way. And
Oh.
so when all of my friends were kind of going out, and it's like they'd finished their exams and were going out and having fun, I was kind of just, I'd
Yeah.
think I think because I knew there was a lot of pressure coming up before the university was coming, and there were
Mm.
so many changes going on. And looking back, I also think there was a bit of subconscious kind of like, what I was doing was also stopping all of that process, that maybe I wasn't feeling ready for. I think
Yeah.
it was almost kind of my way of self-sabotaging that
Yeah.
process, and kind of going like, I'm
Yeah.
not quite ready for all of this. Let's just stop for a second. And
Yeah.
um yeah, I was very lucky that kind of that I did get help, and I did decide that I actively wanted to get better quite quickly. Kind of,
Yeah.
I know that's a real struggling sort of point for a lot of people. That it's making that key decision to actually, no, this isn't good for me. I'm not well. Kind of, this isn't healthy. I started off wanting to better myself, and I'm really unwell.
Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, I was fortunate enough to spend time recovering, and learning how to really to be healthy the right way, just really that you could kind of you could achieve it without so much extreme measures. And
Yeah.
um, so once I recovered, I always had in the back of my mind that at some point in my life I would want to kind of share what I'd learned with people, because even now as a coach, I see people going about things the wrong way, and I see things in the media where extreme diets are still promoted.
Yeah.
And people, of course, in fairness to people sometimes that I come across have been wanting to lose weight for a really long time. And so the more that time goes on, the more desperate they become to want to get results, and sometimes they want them quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, with like the introduction of the internet now, we're just swamped with this sea of information
Yeah.
about health, and so many different theories about what's the best way to eat. A lot of things suggesting we cut out whole food groups, and lots of different restrictive things, selling it on the idea of I did this and it worked for me.
Yeah.
And it can be just really, really confusing for people. And I kind of spent quite a long time not really being ready to share everything with everybody. I think it took me a long time. I kind of, I wanted to, but I kind of wanted to just sort of shake off that whole identity of somebody that's been through something. I wanted
Yeah.
to just kind of go traveling, and just sort of get on with my life, and just kind of do that when I was ready.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't long after that I travelled, and then I met my husband, and unfortunately went on to, like you said, have four lovely, lovely children.
Yeah.
And I was told, because of what had happened, that I may well not be able to have children. So for me, that was
Yes.
amazing. And that we also had kind of struggles through that period too, and that was a big test for me, that I could go through those harder times and not fall back into those kind of coping behaviors.
Yeah.
Um, so I had to kind of be a lot stronger in myself, and know that I could kind of weather those things. And having a family and the responsibility
Yeah.
that comes along with that. I have three daughters, particularly. I'm very, very conscious of not only the way they sort of see me look after myself and the way that we eat together as a family, but also the kind of the self-talk they kind of see me kind of
Yes.
using, that I'm really setting the best example for them in a positive sense.
Yeah.
um, I grew up with a lot of of my female role models kind of criticizing themselves all the time, and
Yeah.
I try to kind of encourage them to do that differently. So yeah, really, to answer your question in a long way, it's really kind of my that passion really came from a really long time ago.
Yeah.
um, and I've been able to kind of be very fit and healthy throughout having my children, and
Mm.
so that enabled me to go through those processes. They were all very big babies, so I kind of,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
recovery was quite tough. But it was then after having the children that I decided, right, I need to take this forward. And it started off with food, and I have a real passion for creating food,
Yeah.
and sharing that too. We have some intolerances in the family, so I've become used to dealing, to
With
working
yeah.
around those. Um, but yeah, just it's just been this lovely organic process of what started off as a passion years ago.
Yeah.
Just really kind of finding I knew that there would be a path to share this with people, and it's just been this lovely kind of just natural path of just finding my way to do that the best way, and that's why I do what I do now.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So, having gone through that, as a teenager, going through anorexia and you having three girls, do you talk to them about what you've gone through so that they are aware of that? Because I know with teenagers, it's so easy to, get, what's the word? I lost my words. Influenced, right?
Yeah.
You watch TV, you watch movies, you look at magazines, and all the girls are skinny, they've got nice bodies, and as a teenager, it's like, oh, I just want to look like that. So, how do you, make sure that they have a healthy body image?
That's so true. Actually, I kind of as soon as my daughters hit their teens, my eldest is 14 now, and that's really quite a crucial age for these
Yeah.
things. And my others are sort of just coming into their teens now, and you're right. There's a huge, particularly pressures that we didn't have. I'm so glad that we didn't have social media
Yeah.
when we were teenagers. I can't imagine how
Yes.
hard it would have been. But yeah, no, that particularly for them, because they're all very different in the way that they're built as well.
Yeah.
My eldest, for instance, takes after my husband, so she's head and shoulders above me and built in a completely different way to me. And
Yeah.
some of the others are very tiny, and it's always reminding them that we are so unique in the way that we're made,
Yeah.
and and that we can all be beautiful in the way that we are individually, and
Yeah.
trying my best to kind of encourage them not to try and compare themselves all of the time to not only their friends, but like you said, in the media as well. And
Yeah.
there are some quite unique body shapes that are now being promoted. I think unique is probably the best
Yeah.
the best word I can
Yeah.
use, but not they're really unusual. The kind of the body shape that now has become very popular,
Mm.
um, and um, and it's not achievable for most people naturally at all
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
very conscious that uh, they see me eating regularly. Like I said, sort of that hearing like positive self talk,
Yeah.
and I encourage them all the time to be open and speak to me, and always kind of voice any kind of feelings that they have around that, really. But you're
Yeah.
right, the pressures are
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, and it's great that you have that communication with them because as parents, I think a lot of times, when you have that disconnect and you can't communicate, that's when the issues arise. It's just so important to keep that channel of communication open with our children.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So, Sophie, was there a particular, if I know you talked about your eating disorder when you were younger, and your passion for being healthy. Was there a particular event that really ignited you to go, right, I'm going to do this health coach thing now, like right now?
I think I think kind of there was a period where I kind of really wanted to do it, but kind of at the same time, probably a bit, you'll probably relate to this, I really wanted to be there as a mum, you know,
Yeah.
like I love being a mum so much, and I'm just so aware of how quickly they grow,
Yeah.
and it's funny, I kind of almost accidentally ended up giving advice to people. People would see me kind of getting back into shape after having the children,
Mm.
and because we had kind of 4 and 4.5 years, it was kind
Yeah.
of a
Oh,
big up and down
yeah.
kind of process.
Yeah.
um, and and people would come to me with questions about food and health, and I kind of found myself doing it kind of casually for quite a long time, just
Yeah.
people coming to me for bits of advice, um, and I think there was that point where I kind of thought, do you know what, they're old and they're independent now. They can cope with these things,
Yeah.
and and I have learned through all the different kind of ups and downs that I've gone through in life that really the key to kind of recovering from all of the things I've had to weather in life has been
Mm.
making sure I look after myself, my health and well-being, you
Yes.
know, not just the way I eat. And I've learned that you wholeheartedly you can have the exercise in place and the food in place, but unless you're emotionally well, unless you're, you know, you're absolutely okay in yourself, then you won't ever be truly well, if that makes sense. You know,
Yeah,
just you really have to
definitely.
be okay in yourself.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to ask you, I know you were, you know, as a teenager, you know, when you actually were hospitalized, you were, you know, very, you had that self-awareness to go, actually, I just want to get better, right? And
Mhm.
I'm actually a hospital pharmacist in a pediatric hospital, and I've, you know, I've been on the anorexia ward, and those girls, you know, they just keep coming in, you know, it
Yeah,
takes a, sometimes it just, they're there for a long, long time, right? And so
yeah,
it's a mental health issue as well.
it is.
So
Yeah.
yeah, for you, you know, to just have that awareness, do you, you know, was that kind of like a aha moment or a spiritual awakening, you know, kind of event for you?
Do you know, it was really quite funny. You're right. It's that pivotal thing is very, very hard. Just that one step to say enough is enough. I think, and particularly when you've gone on for a very long time, kind of denying anything's wrong. You know, kind of telling yourself that you're absolutely fine. And where I ended up when I went into hospital was kind of because of my age, obviously still being a teenager, it was kind of like a young person's kind of unit.
Mm,
So there was a whole host of us there, that had all different things going on, lots and lots of different things going on, um, and some really big characters in amongst that too.
yeah.
And I can distinctly remember one very large, very kind of very tall, kind of gentle giant of a guy who um, I mean, I think he had a history of violent outbursts, and he'd gone through a very difficult time, but underneath it all was just like the sweetest person.
Yeah.
But he didn't mince his words, and I remember him coming to me one day and saying, like, you look bloody awful. Like, you look terrible. And it was just, everybody had been so tiptoeing around me like on
Yeah.
eggshells. Everybody's so conscious of my feelings, and being so lovely.
Yeah.
And and he just said the very first thing that came into his head.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we formed quite a good friendship over like the coming weeks
Yeah.
after that, and I got to know so many other people. But because of the situation and the characters they were, kind of nobody held back in giving their opinion, and
Mm,
everybody was really honest with one another. And that whole process of us just sharing everything that was going on was just strangely kind of cathartic. It was,
yeah.
and it made such a relief to have people that were really frank with me, that were just, you know,
Yes.
saying things as they were. And and I think it was just, it was those moments of him just sort of people like him kind of going, this is like really bad. And I do also remember that that a relative of mine knew somebody that had gone through a similar thing. And I remember speaking to her on the phone, and her saying to me, like, no one is going to get you better other than you.
Yeah.
This is you now, you know.
Yeah.
um, and we, you know, you can get support and you can talk about kind of the root of what's going on here, but you have this, the all of the power here is going to come from you and from no one else.
Yeah.
And I kind of just remember thinking, do you know what, this, you know, this is me now. If I don't take charge of this, if I don't, you know, my friends are off having fun and
Yeah.
I'm sat here in a room with no window, and it's, you know, it's
Yeah.
yeah. And I just think it was that thing of like, oh, there's enough.
Yeah.
Just I have to start living and doing something else.
Yeah.
And that moment where I did that just changed everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
That's beautiful. I've got goosebumps listening to that story. Yeah, and so glad, that you got through it and you're here where you are now. So, Sophie, having,
Yeah.
gone through everything you've gone through, what is your personal mission? So what are you here on this earth to do?
I want to make sure that as much as possible, as much as humanly possible, I can help people achieve the, not just the body that they want, but the you know, the vision of themselves that they really want, you know,
Yeah,
for both inside and out. I want to help women feel empowered and strong and healthy, and to know that they can go about it the right way. It's
yeah,
I to save them all of the sort of the wrong turns and the hiccups that I did wrong along the way,
yeah,
and take all of the knowledge and experience I have now as a professional and really help them achieve it the right way, in a safe way. And
yeah,
there are so many things that I see where it's promoting kind of an approach that really isn't kind to your body, and and particularly for women um, of my age that have had children as well. You have to have a level of respect and care for your body that I
yeah,
think very often when you see things on the media, they're workouts and diets done by people in their 20s that have never had
yeah,
children and never had a family. And our bodies change and evolve,
yeah,
and I try and encourage women to embrace the changes that happen to them, and
yeah,
know that I think I think for me, when I'd had children, it's very easy to feel like we've lost control over all the changes that are happening to us.
yeah,
We're one person before we have our first child, and we kind of evolve into this other person afterwards.
yeah,
And there's so many beautiful things that happen with that too. But there are sort of things that you kind of need to accept and
yeah,
to embrace, and it's helping them to do that, but also to know that you can get that feeling of control back and that strength back that you had before.
yeah.
um, but to encourage them to do it in a way that's really respectful for them and kind to them, I think is
Yeah.
key for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so true because like, even for myself, after my second baby, like I remember looking in the mirror and going, oh my God, I just look like shit. Like, you're looking at my body after a shower, I was like, I just had so much self-hatred for my body but then it took a while, but it was like, you had a baby, come on. Like,
Yeah, be
be
easy on
kind.
yourself.
Yeah, you need to be
Yeah,
kind to yourself. You had a baby, you grew a human inside of you, right?
yeah,
And your body needs that time to readjust and get back to, you know, normal, some kind of normal, right? Because your hormones are all over the place after pregnancy. So, yeah, it's just so important to be kind to yourself and not judge yourself. And I found that once I stopped doing that and I kind of went back into exercise as well, and now I'm like, I don't have that, self judgment. I'm really happy, now with my body because I've just kind of let go of that judgment. And it just makes such a big difference because it keeps you motivated as well, to
yeah,
keep going. Yeah. Because when you keep looking at yourself and just putting that judgment on, you just feel so like so down, right? And then you just don't want to do anything half the time.
Yeah, and I see that kind of that lack of confidence in so many women, and that, like you said, that real self-judgment that we're almost hardwired to do. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we're born with this insane ability to be really hard on ourselves
Yeah.
and to judge ourselves. And and like you said, I've been there. I kind of the first time I had a child, it was like I remember thinking, wow, like okay, I'll just breathe for a moment. And by the time I'd kind of had four, it was like, and I'd had surgeries to have some of them too, and
Mm,
it was it was a difficult time. Um and yeah, and it was kind of giving myself the grace to just take a breath for a moment and
yeah.
not feel that pressure to be the person I was, and to know actually I don't want to be that person I was before. I just want to be the best version of me now,
Yeah.
and however that is fine.
Yeah. I love that because, you should, well, you never just stop growing, right? So it is an ongoing process. Yeah. So, Sophie, I want to go even more deep and personal with you if you're up for it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, you talked about quite a lot of events that happened to you along the way on your journey. Was there, and, they were quite challenging times, I can
Yeah.
imagine from, your stories. But was there a particular event that you found to be the most challenging and just led to your biggest breakthrough?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's funny when you have four children, particularly if you have them in a short space of time, everybody's perception, and it's what I always tell my children actually, is just because you see something from the outside, it doesn't necessarily make it so.
Yeah.
And um, people would always say to me, wow, it must have been so easy for you. You know, like you've had four kids in so many years. You must just like, you must have fallen pregnant like really easily. And it
Yeah.
didn't happen that way at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And although we've had four, I've had twice as many pregnancies as I've had children.
Oh, wow.
And and it's always hard whenever you have a miscarriage or anything. It's a hard thing to go through for any woman. You know, it is just heartbreaking, and it doesn't, to a degree, it doesn't also matter how early that is either. You know, that perception of, oh, it's just early on. It just, we're all the same, particularly if you're trying so hard to have a child.
Yeah.
That moment that you think, wow, this magic is happening. And of course, even sometimes when you miscarry, your body is very clever at still boosting all your hormones and flooding you with all these kind of pregnancy feelings.
Mm,
And then you build up your hopes, and then it's gone. And it's it, that was a real roller coaster. I feel so lucky that we had our first child without any issues, because
yeah.
that was the one pregnancy of all of them that actually I was fairly relaxed, and I really got to just embrace it
Yeah.
and really enjoy it. But we kind of, after having him, we did then have miscarriages, and of course then as soon as you have, even when you fall pregnant successfully, it's so stressful.
Yeah.
It's so stressful because you worry about the slightest thing. Just I as a person, my husband always teases me for this, but I'm quite kind of aware of my body.
Yeah.
So I'm quite a self-aware. So I would tune into every feeling, everything that would kind of give me cause for worry.
Yeah.
So they were sort of sadly stressful times, um, and we we'd had the worst sort of time for me was when we'd had all four of them, and even my third childbirth. So we kind of had to have a crash section for her.
Yeah.
They I was in the middle of labour,
Oh.
and her heart just went on the monitor, just disappeared, and I had like a big contraction that just didn't seem to let go. And
Mm.
all of a sudden, the room was filled with surgeons that kind of literally ran with me on the table like
Yeah.
something from a movie, just um, and and kind of had to put me out. So I wasn't even awake when she was born, which was
Wow.
that was quite
Mm.
bizarre. You
Yeah.
know, as a mother, that experience at that moment,
Mm.
kind of, that was very tough, because I kind of, having had two natural births before, I kind of was just,
Yeah.
set up for that. And bless her, it was funny because I also really struggled to breastfeed her for some reason too. And there was a lot of trauma around her birth that I don't know whether it just spilled into the two of us, but we just could never really kind of do it. And I remember reading so many books that said that you don't bond with your baby as much if you don't breastfeed. So I went to such lengths to make sure that whenever I bottle fed her, she was looking me right in the eye. Like, she probably
you
thought
will bond with me.
Yeah, it was so funny. But yeah, she probably thought I was this very strange mummy. But actually, it's funny, we were so incredibly close now that kind of, now I look back, I needn't have worried, but that was quite tough. But after we had our last baby, I'd had to have a C-section, obviously my third, and I'd elected to have a C-section then for my fourth, because I have a history of quite large babies too, thanks to my husband's genetics. Really quite generous. And two of them are like 10 pounds, and I was like, this is like a lot. So fortunately our fourth child, sort of autumn, that went really well. And in the years that follow, I fell pregnant again, and it's funny, people sort of say, you must be insane, you've got 4 children. And our first child was a boy, and we were only going to have one. But he was just the most adorable, just lovely thing, and I just fell in love with him instantly. And he often reminds his sisters, if I wasn't so lovely, you wouldn't all be here.
Bit of an ego boost there.
Yeah, very big ego boost. And I think there was just something in me that, wouldn't it be lovely to have another boy after having 3 girls? And I just, do you know, as insane as it sounded, and my friends would see me with 4 children under the age of 4, I loved it. I all the busyness and the nappies and the sleepless nights, I just embraced it all. I loved it.
Awesome.
And I loved it. So we debated as to whether or not to try again, and eventually made the decision that we would. And I fell pregnant and was just elated. I was so pleased and thought, right, this is it, you know. And quite early on in the process, there were signs that kind of things weren't quite right. So I would have a bit of spotting kind of early on in the process, and I kind of, obviously because having miscarried before, I was so worried. So went in for kind of scans. They said, no, actually, everything seems to be okay. It's just maybe one of those things. You know, some people have these things and go on fine. So we went on, and sadly the bleeding kind of got worse. So we went back in for more and more scans, and they identified after a while that what had happened is that the baby had kind of latched itself on right onto where my scar was from my C-section. So where it had sort of lodged on was right where this scar had been. And so it was kind of a precarious place. They were saying, well, they weren't too happy with where it was, but the baby was actually fine. So although I was having all these signs that things weren't quite right, essentially the baby was healthy. And I had 2 very different opinions. My doctor was like, something's not right. I'm not comfortable with this. But the hospital were very kind of pro, like, this baby is healthy. We should do all. And of course, as a mum, naturally, your instinct is, I will do anything to protect this baby. And so kind of, even though my instinct was telling me something isn't right here, and my body was telling me that, I was so intent on doing everything I could to hold on to that baby, particularly having miscarried. Knowing that the baby was actually essentially fine made me want to kind of hold on to it even more. So this went on right through the first trimester and into the second. And as time went on, the bleeding would get heavier, and still they would say, it's one of those things, the baby's doing fine, this will calm down. And we went in for a scan, for a checkup, because I'd been experiencing quite a lot of pain, and I was so worried by this point. And they said, do you know what, we're thinking that things are starting to get worse. We need to kind of have a closer look. So they gave me kind of a deeper scan, and and realized that it was, what's amazing about birth and about conception is the baby can actually root itself on really strongly. Once you have a healthy baby,
Yeah.
It's almost bulletproof. It will do everything it can to latch itself on and to take what it needs from you, which is the beauty of the whole process.
Yeah.
But because of where it was weakening where my scar was. And they said, our concern is now if you go on, this is going to open up and you're going to just bleed out. And I was in this thing of just, I so desperately wanted to hold on to it. The nurses were, and what made it worse was the nurses would show me the scans, and they would say, like, here are feet forming, and here's, so of course, all of those things as a mother that you kind of hold on to. So I was seeing all of those things that made me believe that I should be doing everything I can.
Yeah.
And my family were naturally really concerned. And I kind of, even then I was like, I just give me a moment just to breathe and just sort of see if things will settle. And they didn't. And I remember walking the children to school and suddenly being in so much pain and bleeding so heavily that I had to just sit at the side of the road and call someone to come and get me.
Yeah.
And they took me straight into hospital, and it was starting to kind of, they realized it was starting to kind of to open up the scar. So they said, we have to terminate the pregnancy. And I just, but what was worse is they put that decision on me. They still said that, they basically described me as a ticking time bomb. He said, you are a ticking time bomb. If you don't do this, you are not going to have the strength to carry this baby to term. But it's funny, you have this insane protective kind of mechanism, don't you, for your children? And and it didn't matter that it was child number 5. I love them all, so much. That didn't matter at all. But they still kind of put that decision on me, which was really hard. So I didn't really have a choice. But the worst thing was that they, because of what was happening, they had to do it with me awake. So they gave me sedation and basically stopped the baby's heartbeat, and it was just the most horrendous time. And no, I don't think any amount of sedation really kind of numbs that, really. So they were hoping once that had happened that my body would naturally kind of just sort of shed the baby over time. But almost as soon as they had done the procedure, I started to feel a lot of pain in my shoulders. And I remember saying to my husband, that's a really odd place to be feeling pain. Like, after all this, why am I getting this pain in my shoulder? This is really strange. And it's funny, I tell people off for doing this all the time, but we were on our way back from the hospital, and I Googled it. I kind of thought, you know what, I just... why would I be feeling it here? And I always tell people not to do that, but I'm so glad I did now. And I quickly kind of read that shoulder tip pain can sometimes be a sign that you have internal bleeding. And my husband was like, I think we should keep an eye on this, just see how things go. And this gradually got worse. So I ended up back into hospital kind of within 24 hours, and they said, right, you know what, we really need to kind of go and do a D&C and try and kind of, in a controlled manner, try and do this without the scar opening up. And at this point, even though they'd done a procedure, the kind of the umbilical cord, so everything that rooted into me was actually starting to kind of work its way outside my uterus and towards my bladder and attached to my bladder. So kind of things were getting quite serious at this point. So they tried to do kind of that in surgery, and as soon as I came around from the surgery, I was in insane amounts of pain. I just they tried nerve blocks and so many things, and nothing seemed to really get on top of it. So they did their best and sent me back to the ward and kind of said, like, sorry, everything's happened. Sadly, some people were really sensitive and others really not to my situation. And I was put on a ward right next to the maternity unit. So it was like every time the doors would open, I would just hear babies all of the time, which was just the worst
Yeah.
feeling. And every time a new doctor came to me, they would ask me to tell them my story again. So I got to this point where I just wanted to hold like a piece of paper and say, here, just have this, and
Yeah.
don't make me say it anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but I still had this pain in my shoulder, and it was still there. And as the evening went on, my breathing started to get really heavy. And I started to tell the nurses that I really started to feel really unwell.
Mm.
And they told me it was gas and
Yeah.
things from after the surgery, and they offered me peppermint tea. I was like, I can't look at that stuff now. And they were like, no, this is just as a result of the surgery. You'll be, it's fine.
Mm.
Everything went fine. And, when you just have that feeling, I
Yeah.
think we are really intuitive as human beings. We can
Yeah.
just tell something isn't right. Um, and I thought I should not be in this much pain. And as the hours were going by, my breathing was getting heavier. Um, and they just kept assuring me I was fine. And all of the surgeons and all of the doctors and consultants all went home for the night.
Mm.
And and the ward, kind of all the lights switched off, and it
Yeah.
was just me in a room with kind of 3 or 4 other women. And as the evening went on, all these other women in the ward who, in fairness, they had their own things going,
Yeah.
were all coming to me saying, I can see something's not right. I can hear you breathing now. I can hear you really
Yeah.
struggling to breathe. And by the time kind of the middle of the night came, I couldn't even talk.
Wow.
And so I texted my husband and said, please come
Yeah.
in. And I remember he came to the door, and they said, no visitors. And he said, no, like, but I have to come in.
Yeah.
Something's not right. And I went through the whole night with them doing tests, and they took my iron levels,
Mm.
and they'd gone from being kind of around a 10 or 11, kind of when I first started, to being like a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it just
Yeah.
dropped right out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they did a CT scan the following morning, and by which time I'd had more than 1.5 liters of blood in my abdomen that just,
Yeah.
and they had no idea. So all of a sudden the consultants came in, many apologies, and it's so funny. It's the kind of person I am. Even after that, the consultant sat on my bed and said, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to do a hysterectomy. The only way I can save your life now is to do this.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm so sorry. And I don't know, it's just something about me. I didn't want to ruin his day. So I went, don't feel bad. What planet was I on? It's just the person I am. And I hated to think that, because he had this sad face, and I hated to think that it was going to ruin his day.
But you're about to die.
And I was about to die. And I was like, don't feel bad. You're just doing what you have to do,
Yeah.
And so, so I was rushed down to surgery, and they had to do an emergency hysterectomy, and
Wow.
full of apologies, and lots of kind of arse covering, lots of doctors saying kind of like, your life was never in danger, like,
Yeah.
sue us.
Yeah.
And even the hospital actually came to me, and like I can't remember what sort of section of the hospital it is, but they basically said, you can make a case of this if you
Yeah.
want to. But at that point, I'd been through so much.
Yeah.
I wanted to just wash my hands of everything and just say,
Yeah.
no more. Like, I don't. And it took me a long time to recover from that. That was emotionally, it was really hard. And because I'd been pregnant, I had all these hormones still in my system that kind of was still there.
Mm.
And I came home to kids that wanted to play and pull on me and cuddle, and I was so torn. I was so sore, and I wanted to cuddle them, but every time I did, it made me upset, and I was a real mess. And that was insanely hard. And I think that's why I'm always in touch with why you have to be okay in yourself. You
Yeah.
know, that I think to a lot of people for a long time, I think from externally, I probably looked like I was okay,
Yeah.
but for a long time inside, I wasn't. It took a
Yeah.
long time to get that back.
And it's that's such a, really powerful story, like, of strength and, just everything that you've been through. And it's so true, like so many of us, especially women, we like to just pretend we're okay, but inside we're dying, but no one knows, and we shouldn't have to be like that. We should be able to be our authentic self, and but I mean, still be able to lead a normal life and be who we are and not be judged by, if we're, not always happy and,
Yeah, yeah,
pleasing you, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so
absolutely.
important. But wow, that is definitely a big challenge. And thank you so much for sharing that, because, it's such a personal story. And I know, like, a lot of women who had miscarriages, in the past, I've known quite a few of my friends have. It does take a long time. I've known friends that had a miscarriage and just couldn't have another baby because they had a miscarriage. So, knowing that,
Yeah.
it's you can get through it, and you can have babies again even if you have a miscarriage.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it makes it a more anxious experience, I think, for people. And you're right that we are very good as women at pretending that we're okay. It's funny, even now when people would joke with me afterwards that didn't know what had happened,
Yeah.
particularly when we moved, and would say, "Oh, like, I don't suppose you want any more then, like you've got your hands full." And I would never tell them.
Yeah.
I never wanted to make somebody bad for joking about it or
Yeah.
or for having fun. So rather than be honest about what had happened, I'd always go, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly have any more, like
Yeah.
I've got my hands full." And I would just brush over it because I
Yeah.
didn't want to make someone feel bad for kind of having just had fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is about just letting people know that it's okay to have an off day,
Yeah.
and it's better to be honest about it and let that
Yeah.
out than it is to try and put on that front of I'm
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
Yeah. And when you have an off day, it doesn't mean you're going to be shouting at everyone. It's just, you just need that time to just be with yourself and not have to socialize and, meet everyone else's, meet the demands of everything that, you're supposed to do. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Sophie, you've been through so much, and thank you so much for sharing with us. So, with everything you've gone through, can you share with us some of the tools or teachers that were really helpful in your healing process?
For me, funny enough, the creativity for me has been a big thing.
Mm.
It might sound kind of random to some people, but um, I love being creative, and I find it really therapeutic. And when I'm not doing kind of the health, wellness, kind of fitness part of me, I'm always creating something else. And um, the way I coped when I came home, I remember, was there was a random poster came in the door, a craft competition at the
Yes.
school for parents. And um, and you know what, at a time when I couldn't talk about what was going on, and a time when I couldn't verbalize it or even write it down, it just focused my mind on something else, just expressing the other side of me. And I think
Yeah.
for me, the importance has been allowing myself to explore all the parts of my life that make me whole, whether that's creativity, um, whether it's my career. There are so many different elements that make us a whole human being, and whenever we try and just focus on one or two, we might become really good at those things. But it's only when we really embrace ourselves as a whole person,
Yeah.
and look at ourselves in the whole, that we actually start to be properly happy and contented.
Yeah.
um, so for me, it's been exploring all the different parts that make me me, and kind of giving myself time to explore those other things too.
Yeah.
I think we're more in balance when we do that.
Yeah. I love that. Is there, I love reading. So, is there a particular book that, has changed your life?
Um, Not so funny. I kind of I love to read. and don't give myself the time I should now to read as much as I do. But funny enough, there was a particular piece called The Trapeze. It was a poem that Joshua Rosenthal did from Integrative Nutrition, and funny enough, it spoke volumes to me, because it's basically all about our need to kind of, if you imagine our life as a trapeze, and each big leap that we make, letting go of that trapeze to grab the next one, but actually realizing that actually we're living in that gap between letting go of one and holding on to another, and that we can embrace that moment where we kind of leap into the unknown a bit, and actually, rather than see that as a big fearful thing, but to know that actually that's part of living, part of being who we are, and embracing that makes it so much more fun, and gives us a different view on life, actually. I think rather than always being afraid of what's coming next, actually making a conscious decision to take a leap for what's coming next, and to kind of embrace that fear to a certain degree. Because I always sort of say to sort of a lot of the women I work with, that kind of there's a lot of growth and personal kind of growth that's on the other side of that fear that we have. And it's from letting go. I think, I mean, I know you said it yourself earlier on, letting go is so important in so many different ways. But it is important that we do that, because if we don't, we can't ever quite get to the next point in our life. You can't do both. You can't hold on to one trapeze while grabbing the next one. You have to be able to let go.
That's right.
And I think that kind of mirrors, like we said at the beginning, kind of that experience we have throughout our life, in all the different periods of our life that we have, and the different chapters of our life, that you can't really embrace the person you are in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s if you're still holding on to the person you were in your 20s.
That's right.
Just you can't. And I always encourage women to really not want to be the person they were 10-15 years ago, but just to really embrace the person they are now, and know that can also be a strong, confident, sort of sexy kind of person, but the person that they are now, and not the person they were before. And I think we do have to just allow ourselves to flow with those changes more, rather than fighting against it. I think that's important.
And I think with age, the wisdom and knowledge that you gain, I think that's, a lot more sexier than, the knowledge and wisdom you had when you were 20, right? So,
Absolutely.
So, Sophie, I want to ask you, if you could time travel and go back to a younger version of yourself, what advice would you give yourself?
I would tell myself to trust my intuition more. I think that there have been times when I just, in hindsight, when you look back, you think, oh, I just knew it. I could feel something. I just knew it. I think, and to really know that actually I was a lot more capable than I realized. I think I was always, it sounds funny, but I was always pretty good at things, like either through school or something, but I never believed I was, I just never really, I think my reports would say, if only she knew how good she is, like, probably alongside should chat less. but yeah, no, I think it's actually to just, and I think so many people need to know that actually there is so much. I tell my children all the time, you are so much more capable than you realize. You have so many more tools at your disposal than you actually have any kind of idea of. And a lot of the answers, when you're unsure, actually you have those answers yourself, and you don't have to look somewhere else for them. I think that's important, definitely.
I think as a society we've been conditioned to always look outside for answers instead of looking inside. So I love that, you're able to give that advice to your children, at an early age, so that they can grow up knowing that. That's really great. Yeah. So, Sophie, with everything, everything going on in the world right now, all the changes that's happening this year, there's a lot of people that is navigating change. And, I've noticed that a lot of people are kind of starting their awakening journey. So what advice or recommendations would you give them, that, so that they can get rid of any limiting beliefs or fear holding them back to starting that journey or taking that first step?
I think again, it is kind of it's knowing that a lot of people really don't believe in themselves and in what they can achieve. I think I see that all of the time. And one thing that I'm quite unusual, not unusual, but I'm different to quite a few people in the kind of the health, wellness, and kind of fitness space, and that a lot of people try and encourage people to be motivated towards change on the aesthetics. And they sell people the results of looking a certain way in a bikini, or kind of having a certain figure. And, funny enough, I'm more motivated by the changes that happen within people. So I want people to be motivated to change for the feelings they're going to get at the end, not because they're just going to look a certain way. Sure, that's great, and if that's one of the things that motivates you towards change, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But for me, I always want people to get in touch with it. How are they going to feel? How do they want to feel right now? If they don't feel confident right now, is that the feeling that they need to feel? Do they need to have more self-love and acceptance? Is it more self-belief and confidence? Those are the feelings that actually, and even the benefits of change, like reducing your stress and your anxiety, like yourself,
Yeah.
those are the things that have a huge benefit on your health, because it's not just about looking a certain way and appearing so. It's about being alive and living longer and living happier and healthier. And they, all of those benefits, so a lot of the time are the benefits that people don't think of when they think about change. They just see images in the media, and that comparison thing that everybody falls into. Those are the things that often drive people to change, but actually it's the unseen benefits, the bits that we can't physically see and measure with a tape measure or on the scales. Those are bits they're the bits that make us whole. Those are the bits that will make us happier and healthier and have a more significant impact on our happiness and contentment. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. It really just all starts with your mind, like with your mindset. And,
Always.
even with people, and, you're a weight loss expert, like a lot of times is emotional. And when you kind of let go of that emotion, let go of that baggage that you've been holding on, or that story that you've been telling yourself, sometimes, like, I've seen people, the weight just drops off, right? Because you've just
Absolutely.
let go of that baggage, and because it's your body just holding on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's stress and lack of sleep. All those things play a
Yeah.
huge part in people trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
And you could be training for a marathon and eating all the right things, but if you're stressed and pushing yourself too far, you could still be battling with your weight.
Yeah.
It really, you're, like you said, everything starts with your mind.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Love that. So, Sophie, I'm going to take a bit of a turn. I know we've talked about this already, you talking about, loving yourself and giving yourself that compassion and not judging yourself, self-love. Because for me, when I started my journey, my growth journey, my spiritual journey, I found that self-love was a big thing that I wasn't doing for myself, right? So, as a mum of four, busy entrepreneur, busy mum of four, what are the things that you love to do? What are the top 3 things that you like to do to just give yourself that self-love?
Um, I think I'm hardwired as a trainer that fitness for me, that time away that's a lovely way, particularly because it's kind of it's a physical and emotional kind of release when you exercise. And I love everything from yoga to swimming and they all bring with it different kinds of release as well.
Yeah.
So movement plays a massive part in that for me. It's having that space. And it's funny, it used to be space just for me, but now one of my daughters likes to do it with me. So yeah, so, and when she's not doing it with me, she's just critiquing everything I do. So not quite as relaxing as it used to be, but that's quite a nice kind of bonding thing that we do together. And I love cooking. I love just I almost made it onto the British Bake Off once, which is a little bit of trivia.
Really? Well, with that photo that you sent me before with your homemade Ferreros.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. But yeah, no, I love food. That's a huge part of what I offer people within the program is because I think your life should be a delicious and healthy one. I think they don't have to be separate.
Yeah.
People often say to me, I can't, I'm happy eating the foods I enjoy. I'd rather do that than lose weight. And it's kind of like saying to me, do you know, actually you can have both. It's okay.
Yeah. They're not mutually exclusive. They can come
Yeah,
together.
they don't have to be. Exactly. Yeah, for me that's nice. And just time to be mindful. Definitely. Just time to, I like quiet mornings when everybody's still asleep, just to have a moment where I can just kind of really let my mind wind down. I think particularly, I know you'll know yourself as a parent, but it's a busy life and your mind is always kind of ticking away at different things. And I have quite a creative mind, so when I'm not working or I'm not kind of dealing with the children, it's always kind of coming up with something new, and which is great. It's wonderful, but there are times when you kind of need to say, well, okay, let's take a breath for a moment and just
calm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just giving myself the time to do those things, and here it's lovely. We live in such a lovely environment here. I love to get outside and it's not quite as warm here as it is with you, but it's still nice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. So, Sophie, I just love what you have to offer to the world. But what I really like to know is, what is really setting your soul on fire at the moment?
I think, it's for every person I speak to. That it's funny. I kind of, I was excited to work with women and to help women. But every day that I come across a new person who has been battling with something for a long time. A lot of these times, these things have gone on for a long time for people, and like you said, sometimes it's emotional eating, or it's stress, family pressures and work, and some people have battled with their weight for a very long time. It's like a real kind of love-hate relationship they have with their bodies. And every time I speak to a new person and I connect with that person, um, that lights me on fire. That ability to sort of to be able to take someone and say, like, okay, well, these things have all happened for you before, and now everything changes. Everything, all of the pressures you're feeling, all of the pressure you've been putting on yourself, and the feelings that you've had, everything can change from this point onwards. And even just hearing that, almost that breath of relief of somebody kind of hearing somebody say, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to be this hard on myself, or I can change, or I can have more balance in my life. So many people, particularly because I deal with a lot of professional women, is that they're trying to achieve so many things, and it sounds like myself so many years ago, and I can relate to those feelings. And it's about, just love the ability to take somebody and also, and particularly give them the time for themselves. So many people don't do that. They kind of, it's the last thing they do after their works. Some people are working huge amounts of hours and putting themselves last all the time. And I just love that ability to make it all about them, to make, to say, right, for the next 12 weeks or however long you decide to work with me, this is just all about you whenever we speak and whenever we do a session together. And we're going to change everything about the way that you feel. And that for me is great. I just love to give people that confidence and that vitality that they haven't had for such a long time.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's just so important to, really look after yourself because the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And, if you don't look after yourself, then you can't keep going. You'll get to that point where you will just break down. And, I've been there, so I know. So
Yeah.
it's just so important. So I love what you're doing. So thank you. So Sophie, if, people want to, find out more about you and how they can work with you, where should they go?
My website's the best place to head, and that's at sophielouisehealth.com.
Yeah.
And there they can fill in a contact sheet if they'd like to get in contact. There's also a nice download on there, just my top summer foods. Hopefully it's summer wherever anybody is right now.
It's winter here.
And yeah, exactly, you're fine. Yeah, the best thing to do is head to the website, get in contact with the website, and and they can have a free call with me to discuss anything that's going on with them and see how I can help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing your love and wisdom with us today.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I'll have all of your details and any recommended resources available in the show notes so people can reach out to you. So until next time, I love you, I believe in you, and you are worth taking that first step to the life of your dreams.